As many of you may know, for a while now, I have had an interest in beekeeping and the importance and the role that bees have in our environment. So it should come as no surprise that the current work being undertaken with Bermuda's bees and beeswax in association with MIT and their program has had a deep interest from me. Today, I just want to share a few current facts and highlights of some of the challenges facing Bermuda's bee population. Bermuda has had a long history with the honeybee, with some of the earliest records indicating that the first honeybees arrived in Bermuda in the early 1600s. A letter from Robert Rich to his brother in England, sent in 1616, stated, and I quote, "The bees you have sent do prosper well," end quote. And honeybees, for the most part, have continued to, quote, prosper well in Bermuda for almost 4 centuries. The history and importance of the bees in Bermuda and in general are still valid. There are several dozen hobbyists, beekeepers, and a handful of commercial beekeepers here in Bermuda, with around 350 hives, each with its own queen. Our native bee, in case no one knew, we do have one. The solitary bee is a leafcutter bee and is protected under the Protected Species Act, 2003. And there are several other varieties found in our shores. Our current crop of bees have some genetic diversity from mixing with previous imports. Perhaps an older German style of bee, therefore possess some of the genetic diversity that cannot be found anywhere else. In fact, there are bees in Bermuda with a wide variety of genetics, Russian, Italian, Western, German, etc., that contribute in a very special way to Bermuda's natural environment. There are in fact over 20,000 varieties of bees in the world. As we have seen, the recent program with MIT and beeswax, bees and beeswax are an important part of science and science research. Our relationship with Dr. Danielle Wood dates back to April 2018, when I was speaking at the 34th Annual Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, Colorado, USA, where I participated on a panel of emerging spacefaring countries, and she approached me about working with the Bermuda government. Dr. Wood is a member of our Space Advisory Panel, which provides advice, expert opinion, and guidance on the development of Bermuda's space and satellite product. Dr. Wood now leads a team at MIT Media Lab called Space Enabled, whose focus is on sustainability, using space technologies to advance justice in the world's complex systems. She brings a perspective of responsible development to us, and we wish to become known as a jurisdiction of best practice. We are working on the particulars of a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with MIT to develop a more formal working partnership with their academic community to explore learning opportunities for students of varying levels. Dr. Wood's encouragement and guidance were partly responsible for our recently held space camps, and we look forward to hosting, obviously in COVID-appropriate conditions, camps in the future. This past week, we were at the center of the successful launch of the Black Brant 12 rocket from Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. We are often visited by personnel from NASA and the European Space Agency, who monitor and provide mission support to launches coming out of South America and the United States, and anywhere else that has a polar trajectory, because if launched in the Atlantic, the rockets always fly by Bermuda. This is all very exciting research, and we hope that Bermuda bees continue to support researchers in the area of international space operations for many years to come. However, we must also work together on the local front to protect and understand the value that bees offer to our ecosystem here at home. Bees play a vital part in maintaining our planet, allowing our survival and also our habitats and our ecosystems. Their greatest role is as a pollinator, ensuring that trees and plants reproduce and proliferate. As we know, plants make up much of the world's food supply, as well as that of our livestock. They also produce vital oxygen for our survival. It has been estimated that 1/3 of the world's food production depends on insect pollination, most of which is carried out by bees. Every third spoonful of food, everyone, food is that depends on pollination. In Bermuda, bees are responsible for the pollination of almost every above ground crop, including beans, tomatoes, peppers, pumpkin, cucumbers, citrus, peaches, and cherries. The pollination of Bermuda's rare, native endemic, and endangered plants, not to mention our ornamental flowers and trees that make our island so beautiful. Without bees, everyone, locally produced crops would be unavailable, just plain and simple, for consumption, negatively affecting both our farmers and consumers, and the small but thriving production of honey would just simply fail. Information that I have gleaned suggests that the service of bees to agriculture globally is estimated in a value of $70 billion every year. This is just one of the reasons so much attention has grown on the care and survival of the bee population in recent years. In Bermuda, a lack of area for foraging and pests, as well as the varroa mite, have been problematic for local bees. However, our remoteness as an island has allowed us to have kept bees safely for 400 years, until the first recorded instance of the particular pest known as a varroa. Current laws in place ensure that we do not allow bee imports at this time, and no queen bees, and this did help to delay the arrival of the varroa by some 20 years to our shores. Bermuda bee population was hit very, very badly in 2009 when the varroa mite hit the island. This was also an added negative impact on local agriculture. By October of 2010, the mite had infected most of the beehives in Bermuda, causing thousands of local bees to die. But over the past decade, the bee population has grown from strength to strength. Beekeeping has grown in interest, with apiaries, commonly known as hives, maintained even by some members of the corporate community. A few years ago, Bacard International set up an apiary, and they even have one of their selected brands of spirits made with honey. Several local beekeepers are helping to popularize local honey, which is sold by roadside stands and even on social media. This new generation of beekeepers should be applauded for rebuilding the craft and increasing public interest in bees and their wonderful byproducts. The recovery of the local bee is in no small measure and must be credited with the work and patience of Bermudians. Credit to all the local beekeepers, researchers, and apiarists who continue the long tradition of managing and balancing our island bee population. Those same beekeepers responded very positively, I might say, to my request to donate a consignment of local beeswax to support Bermuda's participation in the MIT project. Our bee population can benefit from much more awareness, and our local apiarists will benefit from having the public just buy more honey. We encourage individuals, most importantly, to not spray pesticides indiscriminately, because we know this affects the life and the welfare of bees. In conclusion, we applaud all the local beekeepers, researchers, and apiarists who continue the long tradition of managing our island's bee population. In particular, I would like to mention a particular person that I consider to be basically the father of modern beekeeping in Bermuda, the late Randolph Furbert, who inspired and taught a number of local beekeepers who are now carrying on that tradition. For more information, if you wish, on beekeeping and bees and their care and their importance to Bermuda, please contact the Agricultural Center at 292-4611. And I'd like to thank Mr. Tommy Sinclair, who's here with us, for the work that he did to not only as somebody who is constantly involved with the care and attention of our local bee population, but also he was chiefly the person who actually contacted the beekeepers and got the consignment of beeswax that now is at MIT. So thank you for listening, and I'll look forward to any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon. Owen Johnson Barnes with the Royal Gazette. First of all, for those who might not be aware, can you explain a little bit more about this MIT Beeswax Initiative?
Sure. It's a very exciting project that MIT Media Lab and Dr. Wood with a team is spearheading, and she's working with the team Space Enabled to do it. Essentially, it's all about the use of sustainable fuels in space. To have been a part of with promoting space sustainability, to improve the use of space in a responsible and clean manner. As you would know, perhaps for the last 50, 60 years, there have been satellites and other types of payloads launched into space. So there's a lot of trash in space. And even some of the fuels are known now to be somewhat like polluting of our environment. So there is a movement with this next generation of space technology, and particularly small satellites that will be not necessarily in the orbit around the Earth, but actually in lower Earth orbit, that they're using fuels that are responsible, that are sustainable, and that are clean. One of those fuels that is being experimented with is beeswax. So we are part of a larger experiment that's being done at MIT that will experiment with different beeswaxes from across the globe with their different properties, and seeing how efficient they can be for fueling small satellites in space. So that is the project that we have been invited to be a part of. We're excited because it will create some other opportunities that we are looking forward to sharing with the Bermuda public.
The next question, I guess, would be more towards the probably Mr. Sinclair. I was hoping to hear a little bit more about the status of Bermuda's bee population. Obviously, we have had some challenges in the last few years, and I'd like to hear more about their recovery.
Well, I'm happy to share the podium with Mr. Sinclair, who's our agricultural officer, but also is one of the island's most experienced beer keepers. So, Mr. Sinclair, you can, if you don't mind, you can address some of those very pertinent questions, because he knows the history of this issue much more in depth than I do.
Good afternoon. Yes, Bermuda's bee population did take a great hit back in 2009 after it was discovered that the varroa mite made its way to the island. The varroa mite is probably the most destructive pest known in the beekeeping industry. We lost probably up to 70% of our hives in the subsequent years following that. So we went from well over 300 hives down to, under 100 hives and less. There was a lot of dismay amongst the beekeepers because all the hard work that they've done over the many years was just kind of dying right in front of them. But since that time, we have had the introduction of some varroa-sensitive hygienic bees that are able to cope with the varroa mite. So that genetic is now out there mixing with our bees. This whole pandemic and even before that, there has been a resurgence of interest in beekeeping. So numbers have increased in the number of beekeepers, and the number of hives are probably back to where it was once before. We are subject to storms, hurricanes, and over the past few years we've had our share of hurricanes, and that will play a big impact on the health of the honeybee as well. But I gotta just commend all the beekeepers out there. I think they're doing a fantastic job. Thanks to the beekeepers that donated honey, in particular, if you don't mind me mentioning them, Minister, would be Lowell Woolrich Jr. Actually, him and his father, actually the whole family, the Woolrich family is a great beekeeping family. They donated the bulk of the honey, and if you saw any of the pictures, the wax. The wax that was being held up was wax donated by the Woolrich family. Albert Swan also donated some, and myself donated some as well. But certainly the very pretty looking wax was by the Woolrich family.
And I think there's more room to expand and further develop the local bee economy.
Yes, I think that there probably is. There's still a lot of interest in bees out there. We get a lot of people asking about becoming a beekeeper and what it takes to become a beekeeper. Minister here is also an avid beekeeper now. I think he probably got his stings and learned the hard way like everyone else.
Yes, I have.
Beekeeping is certainly not for everybody. I mean, it's a great idea, but it is a lot of work involved, and you will get stung. So it's good to know that you can take a sting and you don't mind the hard work when it needs to be done. But yeah, there is room for improvement there and growth, I think.
And how do you feel about having the population bounce back the way it has?
I think it was fantastic, and again, it was a lot of hard work by the beekeepers out there helping to maintain their bees' health, to make splits, to really look after them. And anytime there's a swarm of bees, I'm not saying it's a race between beekeepers to get the first, to see who can get there first to get the next swarm, but every beekeeper that I know is interested in expanding and increasing the number of their hives. So whenever there's a swarm call come in, there's a bit of interest, a buzz amongst the beekeepers to see who's going to get that swarm.
Thank you very much. This first question will be from Mr. Sinclair. Gary Foster Skelton from Bermuda Broadcasting. I'm curious to know, how did the other beekeepers react when you said, how would you like to be part of a space project?
Well, they were quite keen on it. At first it was, a little bewildered. What can our bees do in space, type of thing. But there was certainly interest out there when they kind of learned what the program was about. I think that the biggest issue was because this was happening during COVID times, over lockdown or stay at home, and trying to organize getting the wax from the beekeepers. That was probably the biggest challenge, and then getting it to the courier service to get it out of here. But they all thought it was a great idea, and I think they were quite chuffed to think that one of these days they can look up and tell their children or whoever that satellite is being powered by some of our beeswax. So I think they're quite chuffed about that.
And unfortunately, with Dr. Wood not being here, it would be interesting to know the scope of their project, in the sense, is this essentially data collection rather than a full plan for, how can we create fuel? Because obviously we're a small island, but what part, do we have any information on the actual research?
Yes, we have a link that we can send to all the media that will show you the experiment that they're doing with beeswax, which was done by MIT. and we will share that with you. And it's a great link, and you can perhaps show it on television as well, to show people what the experiment looks like, because it not only includes an actual experiment showing a experimental propulsion unit that's using beeswax, but many people would be familiar with some, perhaps if you watch cable television, you'll see that they often have these planes, large planes that fly in the atmosphere and then do a deep dive, and it creates a weightlessness space. So you'll see in this particular clip them actually powering up the experiment in a weightless sort of situation to see how the wax actually responds in weightlessness, obviously to mimic what a small satellite will be doing with it. So we can send that link to you so you can actually see the experiment, and we think that'll be very interesting for people to see.
Definitely. One of the curiosities, again, with not being on task, Dr. Wood, would be, what are the ways in which a fuel in space has to be different from a fuel on Earth?
Yes, well, weightlessness obviously affects it, and certain properties obviously impact the performance of a fuel in space. One of the things about beeswax is, one, obviously it's renewable. You're not necessarily destroying anything that can't be replaced if you take the wax and you use it, so you're not having to dig up ore or damage some part of the environment to create it, because the bees essentially create it and you just sort of manage the product. Two, it's low carcinogenic, it's not liquid, and it's very stable, so it won't have any propensity to, I guess, react sort of violently to create a risk. So as a fuel, it is very stable and very useful and obviously sustainable, because the effort now is to ensure, at least from our standpoint, is to participate in activities as a country that promotes a sustainable use of space. And if there's an opportunity for Bermuda in this small way to make a contribution to the sustainable, clean use of the environment, we are very happy to do so. We just look forward to continuing to participate in the project. And one of the parts of this that we were very keen on is that as the experiments are being done, there will be an opportunity for them to be featured, and for our young people who may be interested, or anyone who's interested in science, to actually view these projects being done, because we are a participant. Yeah. So when they do the experiments, we would be able to watch. Now, I'm going to give you another slight little possibility here. It's remote, but it's still possible. Based on our commitment to this project, there might even be an opportunity for a Bermudian to participate in those projects when they go, when they do them as well in the future. Mm-hmm. It all depends on, as we shape the MOU, there may be an opportunity for us to support a Bermudian being a part of one of the projects and actually participating. So that's what we're kind of excited about as well, is that there are all these possible opportunities, not only for Bermuda to be part of an effort to be about the sustainable use of space, but also the participation that can include our young students. It'll advance STEM activities that we want to advance, and the participation, and just showing how science and nature can be so linked in a way that can be positive.
Well, the final question would be the broad term you used about the Bermuda space and satellite product. Is there some kind of long-term goal, or are these kind of little steps towards something bigger? What can you give us any insight into that?
Sure. Not too long ago, we publicly announced a space strategy for Bermuda. Mm-hmm. That strategy does include exploring opportunities for Bermuda commercially in space, well related to space. Just as a slight reminder, we've been involved with the activity of space for decades. Yeah. So that's nothing new with what went down at Cooper's Island, which has returned to Cooper's Island. I mentioned in my statement about our relationship with NASA, which has returned to have a permanent space here now, and they're using Cooper's Island again. Obviously, we were involved with the launch earlier this week. And if some of you who are watching that launch, you know that although the launch went off this weekend, it had been delayed. Now, if you listen to the report of the launch, it was Bermuda that actually didn't allow the initial launch to go because of cloud cover. So Bermuda plays a major role in space activities, particularly in this part of the Atlantic, and that's a positive thing. But we want to spin off this benefit that Bermuda has and its attribute of being in the right location to having more involvement with the commercial space activity. Obviously, Wallops is a government-related facility, but as you know from SpaceX and Blue Origin and some other activities by people like Mr. Branson and Mr. Bezos, commercial space is growing. And certainly with the work of SpaceX, basically now they're the main contractor for NASA. They will be lifting payloads now for the International Space Station, for the moon launches, and beyond. And Bermuda can play a role in that. But there's also another commercial side to space that we believe Bermuda can be positive, which is in the area of ensuring space risk, which we are advancing those discussions and those opportunities with our local reinsurance industry. And also, there are other types of services now that are being developed through space technology. Now, in general, I'll put it under the umbrella of Earth observation. That is becoming a lot more important now than some other activities in the past, such as the broadcasting of visual media and just transmitting communications. Now, the Earth observation industry is growing because there are a lot of data is being generated through the need to observe our oceans, to have better, I guess, awareness of what's happening on land and the sky. And there are satellites being put up to do a lot more marine and earth and air observation activities. It's just data to monitor the activities of Earth and to improve our care and attention to the Earth, or just for other commercial reasons. The other thing that Bermuda is hoping to attract companies, and we have attracted a number of space companies here that are expanding certain satellite activities, is to be directly connected to small satellites. We're all used to sort of having the knowledge of big satellites that are orbiting the Earth that provide the, pushing certain communications around the world. But the reality is that smaller satellites that will expand broadband activity across the globe are being put up. Recently, you would know that Mr. Tesla, he has put up a huge constellation which is helping to expand broadband. So these are the things that Bermuda can get involved with, because these are commercial activities that actually we are well placed to be involved with, and we're already attracting companies in this area now. We're just looking to expand those activities more, and this is core to what our space strategy is looking to promote.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, and that concludes our conference for today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you very much.